Page 98, she stews a hare with as many mixtures, but does not intoxicate her so extravagantly with wine, prescribing only 1 spoonful. Next is a hare civet. She bids bone the hare and take out the sinews, then cut 1/2 into thin slices, and the other half in pieces an inch thick, to flour and fry them in butter like collops quick, and to have ready some good gravy made of the hare's bones and beef. Put a pint of it into a pan to the hare, a little mustard and elder vinegar, to stew it till it be as thick as cream. This teacher has no connection with the true art of cookery. For strong meat, as pork, beef, or goose, mustard and vinegar may help digestion and is very proper. But the harmless hare that never gave offense to any stomach, except such cookery as this teacher has prescribed to the hare. Her next is Portuguese rabbits. I have, says she, in the beginning of my book, given directions for boiled and roasted. Get some rabbits, truss them chicken fashion. Their heads must be cut off, and the rabbits turned with their backs upwards, and 2 of the legs stripped to the claw end, and so trussed with 2 skewers. Lard and roast them with what sauce you please. If you want chickens, and they are to appear as such, they must be dressed in this manner. Or if they are to be boiled for chickens, cut off their heads and cover them with white celery sauce, or rice sauce, tossed up with cream, says she. When I see this teacher's transformation of rabbits into chickens, it raised me from very low to high spirits, being but newly recovered from a long sickness, which had sunk my spirits very low, till Portuguese rabbits raised them to their full height. When I saw how easy it was to the teacher to make rabbits into chickens, no more than cut off their heads, turn up their backs, and strip the 2 legs to the claw end, and so trussed with 2 skewers, I thought myself in the midst of an assembly of illiterate maids. Every one had a rabbit trying their utmost skill to make a chicken of the 4-footed creature. Some stripped the 4 legs to the claw end, some the hind legs, but none of them could make the links of the back ply into the form of a chicken breast. And by the strength of imagination I thought I heard the whole pupil assembly give their teacher a general curse for affirming her art of cookery easy, which by trial they found impracticable, and her transformation a mere cheat on their understandings. Next is a rabbit surprise. To roast 2 half-grown rabbits, you must cut off their heads and first joints. Then toss the lean of the backbones with cream and butter, till it is thick and good, and then upon the backbone of each rabbit is a long trough of forcemeat to be fixed, and filled with the tossed-up flesh that is taken of the roasted rabbits' backs, which is to be covered with forcemeat, rubbed over with raw egg. Make your trough square at each end, and to be baked 3/4 of an hour. Query, whether she gave the forcemeat a proper foundation to secure the gravy or cream sauce from being let out by the back links of the rabbits, or let it be double and treble queried, whether ever troughs were built on rabbits' backs before. If the lady's ingenuity enables her to metamorphose rabbits into chickens, and build large square-ended troughs on their backs, no doubt but through the profundity of her contrivances she'll be finding out the mystery of transforming them to elephants and erecting forcemeat castles on their backs. In page 100 is a neck of mutton called the hasty dish. This teacher bids take a large pewter or silver dish, with an edge about an inch deep on the inside, on which the lid fixes, with a handle at top, so fast that you may lift it up full by the handle without falling. This dish is called a necromancer. She bids take a neck of mutton of 6 pounds, cut into chops, a sliced French roll, a large onion, 4 turnips, a bundle of sweet herbs, 3 blades of mace. All these are to be put into this dish, in their separate layers, and to fill it with boiling water, and cover it close. To hang the dish on the backs of 2 chairs by the rim, To tear 3 sheets of brown paper into 15 pieces, which are to be drawn through your hand. Light 1 piece of paper and hold it under the bottom of your dish, moving the paper about, and as fast as one burns, light another, till all is burnt, and your meat will be enough. 15 minutes just does it. This dish, says she, was first contrived by Mr. Rich, and is much admired by the nobility. Very likely Mr. Rich might be on his travels in a very poor country, where there might be great scarcity of firing and good cooks. So necessity, the mother of invention, might produce the above contrivance to get support on the road. But will reason, or the least art of cookery dictate, that the flame of 3 sheets of paper will boil 6 pounds of mutton cut into chops, with turnips, onions, herbs, etc., notwithstanding the boiling water she orders at first to be poured on the meat, etc.? The very quantity of flesh, herbs, etc., will so much abate the heat of the water, that to me it seems very unreasonable that such a small force of heat, as can proceed from 3 fired sheets, will never make her meat and broth to boil. And if such cookery amounts to a tolerable scald, 'tis as much as any reasonable person might expect. Unless there be more heat and strength in paper than my imagination dictates, trial must be allowed the best proof, and whoever has a mind to be befooled into such a ridiculous experiment, have my free leave. As for my part, I shall not make an April idiot of myself, nor persuade any of my readers thereto. If this inventor, Mr. Rich, be Mr. Rich, the famous harlequin and master player at the new theatre, Covent Garden, it may not be altogether impossible. But that he might put such a pun on the lady teacher, and such others of her pretensions, that have laboured hard to impose on their betters, by calling black white, sweet bitter, bitter sweet, unwholesome wholesome, etc. Query, whether a person going hastily by might not with their clothes move one of the chairs, or a dog being in the room, pushing by or through the chairs, would not bring down this fine invention in the twinkling of an eye? Page 102. Another way to make a pillow. Take a leg of veal of 12 or 14 pounds weight, and an old cock skinned. Chop both to pieces, and put into a pot with 6 blades of mace, some whole white pepper, and 3 gallons of water, half a pound of bacon, 2 onions, and 6 cloves. Cover it close, and when it boils let it do very softly, till the meat is good for nothing, and above 2/3 wasted. Then strain it. The next day put this soup into a saucepan with a pound of rice. Set it over a slow fire. Take care it don't burn. When the rice is thick and dry, turn into a dish. Garnish with hard eggs cut in 2, and have roasted fowls in another dish. Buy the rice and eggs in one dish, and the roasted fowls in another. In all likelihood, the teacher designs the thick dry rice and hard egg sauce for the roasted fowls, but whoever gets the rice in their mouths, 'twill stick to their teeth like birdlime, for the old cock must weigh at least 4 pounds, and 14 of veal, so that the strength of 18 pounds of meat to a pound of rice will make it of so glutinous a nature that whoever has it in their mouths will find it stick so close that they'll be thankful to have it out again. So there is wasted what would have made 7 dishes of meat. I divide the veal into 4 parts. 5 pounds I cut to the knuckle, and 4 with greens and the half a pound of bacon. 5 pounds I cut to the knuckle, and boil with greens and the half pound of bacon. Then I cut 4 pounds to the fillet, and this I make a ragout of. And of 3 pounds I make a dish of Scotch collops, and 2 pounds I à l'amande. And the gravy of the knuckle will be sauce for the made dishes. And of the pound of rice and hard eggs I make 2 rice puddings, the one baked and the other boiled. Then, instead of the old cock, I take a young pout, which may be as easily purchased in the market as an old one. This I roast, with egg sauce. So far, teachers differ in their opinions in cookery, for as the cock, bacon, and veal are to boil till the meat be good for nothing, and as the rice was ordered, it was good for nothing. So I make 7 dishes of meat out of nothing, by the lady teacher's nothing, Aryan ingenuity. Next is essence of ham. Take the fat off the ham and cut the lean in slices. Beat them well, and lay them in the bottom of a stewpan, with slices of carrots, parsnips, and onions. Let them stew over a gentle fire till they begin to stick. Then sprinkle a little flour and turn them. Then moisten with broth and veal gravy. Season them with 3 or 4 mushrooms, as many truffles, a whole leek or a clove of garlic, some parsley, and half a dozen of cloves. Put in some crusts of bread, and let them simmer over the fire for 1/4 of an hour. Strain it, and set it away for use. Any pork or ham does for this, that is well made. Thus far the lady directs. Those who do not know the right way are apt to take the wrong, say I. For this teacher reminds me of the fable of the hen that laid the golden eggs every day. But the covetous owner, not being satisfied, cut up the hen to catch all at once. But he paid dear for his covetous search, losing all. Even so has this teacher done the golden essence of ham, by cutting it in pieces, although she keeps the dross for use, which is only fit to give to dogs. And as an instance of her fine judicious taste of ham essence, she says, any pork ham does for this use. And so far I hold with her, for anything of that kind is too good to waste, but that the difference of taste between new and old ham essence is as widely different as is the taste of good old beer and new in the working fat. Now the difference between the teacher's essence and the true essence of ham is this. I take a 2-years-old ham, washes it in hot water with a coarse cloth, then lays it in warm water 4 hours, and afterwards puts it into a large pot in cold water, makes a brisk fire to it, and when it is boiled enough, I take it up and run it through in several places with an iron skewer, and the gravy that runs from it is the true essence, and this gravy put into jelly glazes hot. The fat that issues out along with the gravy will be as a skull to preserve the The fat that issues out along with the gravy will be as a seal to preserve the essence, and it will keep 6 months, and the ham will still remain very palatable, although I can't but acknowledge that a ham ought to go to the table full of its juice, if you would have it in its perfection. But, as I above observed, it will still remain tasteable, and be a very good cold relish. Next, the teacher's rules to be observed in all made dishes are, that all white sauces have a little tartness, smooth, and of a fine thickness, and that all the time the sauces are over the fire, keep stirring them one way, and that brown sauces are not to swim with fat on the top, but to be smooth, and as thick as good cream, and not to taste of one thing more than of another. And as to pepper and salt, season to your palate, but don't put too much of either sort, lest you take away the fine flavor of everything. And as to most made dishes, you may put in what you think proper, to enrich or make it good, as pickled mushrooms, coxcombs, ox palates, artichoke bottoms, asparagus, etc. Here the lady leaves her pupils in a wood, and to their own wild imaginations, so that their cookery may as probably be vitiated as made wholesome, by young beginners in the art of cookery. And as to the judicious cook, she might as well have remained silent. And if the bare reading these, and such like her rules complete the housewife, cookery will be very easily attained. And here I differ in my judgment with the ladies, ordering sauces to be stirred but one way, all the time they are on the fire. For the perfect experienced cook has many various methods in tossing and turning sauces. And for her brown sauce to be as thick as good cream, then will a spoon stand upright in the sauce. And as to her seasoning to the palate, if the illiterate cook be void of palate and judgment, then she may copy after her teacher, by heaping in all rarities at once, without regard to quantity, weight, or measure, doing all at random, hit or miss, lucks all. In page 103, this lady teacher bids, "Read this chapter, and you will find how expensive French cook sauce is," wherein is contained 2 sauces, that is, essence of ham, and 5 culisses. Partridge sauce she calls an odd jumble of trash, and when all the ingredients are reckoned, the partridge will come to a fine penny of money. A cullis for all sorts of ragout. This she bids compute the expense, and see if this dish cannot be dressed full as well without this expense. Cullis the Italian way, to which she says, now this Italian or French sauce is saucy, concludes with, they will make as many fine ingredients to stew a pigeon or fowl as would make a very fine dish, which is equal with boiling a leg of mutton in champagne, and adds it would be needless to name any more, though you have much more expensive sauce than this. However, she thinks here is enough to show the folly of the fine French cooks. She says in their own country they will make a grand entertainment with the expense of one of these dishes, but here they want the little petty profit, and by such sort of legerdemain some fine estates are juggled into France. By these aspersions the lady teacher gives the French cooks, it may be supposed that her great fortune has been impaired by the extravagancy of a French cook. For in this lady's preface she says, if gentlemen will have French cooks, they must pay for French tricks, and seems to be grieved at the blind folly of the age. Says they would rather be imposed on by a French booby than give encouragement to a good English cook. It appears to me that the lady builds her monument of fame upon the ruins she makes of the French cook's characters. I don't like the foundation she has chosen. For notwithstanding all her great bravadoes of thrift, she has tenfold more extravagant French cookery in her book than in the chapter she bids you read. As to her first charge of partridge sauce, it comes far short of her partridge à la braise, and as to the French cook's essence of ham, which she has placed in that chapter for extravagance, that very individual essence of ham she has in the very page before. Therefore I see no reason why it should be a mark of infamy on the French cook, and a trophy of honor to her. The French cook's cullis for all sorts of ragout. She bids compute the expense, and see if this dish cannot be dressed full as well without. I have at her request made a computation, and cannot justly make the charge amount to above 2 shillings, and that exceeds the thrift of her preface cullis, which she braves them with. Yet this French cullis for all sorts of ragout is 1 shilling cheaper than that very thrifty preface cullis is. Now her second chapter, which this teacher calls Made Dishes. I have not seen a book of cookery yet printed that she has not plundered to make up this chapter, which contains 230 dishes and upwards. And although she seems to have been a great traveller by the cookery prescribed from different nations, that is, Turkey, Germany, Portugal, and India, yet put all the cookery she quotes from them together, she has 20 French dishes in this chapter to each 1 dish of all the separate nations. I think she has made public demonstrations of the regard she pays to French cooks, by engrossing so many of their dishes of surfeits and inconsistencies in her chapter, that she had not left a sufficient number to make out the 8 expensive sauces, till she broke bulk for essence of ham, and was so pinched as to charge them with Italian extravagance, or take more out of her own chapter. As to all the French cookery I ever see in print, I thought it a burlesque upon the English, whom they say would exceed all the world for wisdom if they did not eat such gross food. And as there was but little regard taken of their prescriptions, 'tis possible that it was generally looked on in the same light. Yet this lady teacher has artfully abused the French cooks, and as cunningly recommended their cookery for her own. So by what she collects from them and other authors, she becomes mistress of the art, and says she has made it plain and easy, concluding her preface with, she hopes her book will answer the ends she intended it for, which are to improve the servants and save the ladies a great deal of trouble. And begins her first chapter by saying that professed cooks will find fault with touching upon a branch of cookery, which they never thought worth their notice, is what I expect, etc., and adds that she does not pretend to teach professed cooks, but designs to instruct the ignorant and unlearned, which will likewise be of great use in all private families, and in so plain and full a manner, that the most illiterate and ignorant person, who can but read, will know how to do everything in cookery well. A noble pennyworth in cookery, if this teacher has performed the public promises of the benefits the ignorant and unlearned should receive by the reading her book, but if not, it was a puff to help the sale of it, as she could not give them the knowledge she has not herself, nor ever will possess it. Therefore must be a double imposition, first, in deluding and depriving the ladies of their healths. Secondly, in causing the ignorant servants to throw away their money, and filling them full of vain glory. Now, if there is such a sovereign virtue in the naked reading of her book, without a capacity of understanding, which possibly cannot be in the ignorant, then which way does every ignorant maid arrive to such an exalted pitch of knowledge in cookery, as to do everything therein well? Why might she not as well pretend to teach professed cooks? For it is my opinion that the universe cannot produce that cook who knows how to do every branch in cookery well. Does not every separate nation produce something that their neighbors want, and differ in their various ways of cookery? And let a cook search into those arts, and be his genius as great as possible. If he says he can do all cookery well, I will not believe him. I have a circumference of error to produce, which I can affirm for truth, that a housekeeper to a person of distinction robbed the sirloin of the inside of the fillet of beef, the most delicious part of the 4 quarters, which she took for a made dish, and sent up the sirloin to the table with the outside, but no inside was there, which is the favourite of all beef-eaters. Some gentlemen being then at dinner, and who were disappointed of their favourite piece of roast beef, put the lady to the blush, who inquired of her housekeeper the reason of her sending to the table such a naked sirloin of beef. She answered her lady that she made a fine dish of the fillet. But, answers the lady, you have spoiled much finer, and therefore I discharge you for ever to commit the same fault. Yet notwithstanding, this housekeeper prepossessed in favour of, and depending upon the infallibility of her lady teacher. And as her lady mistress was but young, considered which of these 2 ladies she owed most duty to, and after an inward doubting, gave her teacher the preference, who had given her full assurance of doing everything in cookery well. So she cuts off the fillet a second time, and sent up a naked sirloin to the table, for which she got her discharge, lost a good place, and shed floods of tears for her vain glory, for which she might thank her lady teacher. This plainly demonstrates that the age is not so blind as that all are to be imposed upon by the follies of this celebrated lady teacher. The wisdom of the young lady, mistress of her house, shows in turning off her servant, both for wasting her meat and disobeying her orders. And if these are the teacher's promised benefits to the ignorant, she cheats them both of their money and places, and instead of saving the ladies a great deal of trouble, teaches their cooks to prepare such surfeits as may give them pain. In page 107 is to force hog's ears. This teacher says the ears are to be boiled, and a force meat to be made, to slit the ears very carefully to make a place for your stuffing. She bids also fill and flour them, fry them, then stew them in wine, mustard, pepper, onion, and gravy. Dish them up and pour on the sauce. It seems very easy to the teacher to bid slit the hog's ears very carefully to make a place for the stuffing. Yet it is out of her power to divide the gristle of these ears to fill them with forcemeat. And when she has made the best of them she can, she will not make silken purses of her hog's ears. Next is to force coxcombs. Parboil your coxcombs, says she, then open them with the point of a knife at the great end. Then take the white of a fowl, as much bacon and beef marrow, beat in a mortar, with an egg and seasoning, to fill the coxcombs, and stew them in gravy. So small is the morsel that grows on the crown of the cock's heads, that the stuffing this teacher has ordered to be made, all the coxcombs in England, opened at the great end, will not have room to hold it. The morsel is an ornament in made dishes, but where to find room for stuffing in that small matter is the query. Next she tells how to preserve coxcombs. To put them into a pot with melted bacon, and let them boil half an hour. Add bay salt, pepper, vinegar, sliced lemon, and an onion stuck with cloves. When the bacon begins to stick to the pot, to take them up and put them into the pan, and pour clarified butter over them. These, she says, make a pretty plate at supper. This teacher bids boil the small morsels of coxcombs in melted bacon half an hour, a sufficient time indeed to burn them to as many black cinders, and after the many other ingredients are added, that is, vinegar, sliced lemon, onion, cloves, and these, says she, make a pretty dish for supper. The above mentioned are the product of this teacher's own cookery, but preserved coxcombs sets forth the truth of her art of cookery. For after the coxcombs have boiled half an hour in bacon, a little vinegar and the sliced lemon are to be put into the boiling fat, which would give a crack like a cannon, so that there would be no need of the chimney sweeping, for the blast would bring down the soot at once and destroy the pretty supper plate. Although the teacher had taken a method to blast the beauty by the half-hour's boiling in the bacon fat. In page 112 of Forced Cabbage, take a white heart cabbage as big as a quarter of a peck. Half boil it and cut out the heart, but take care not to break off any of the outside leaves. To make a forcemeat of a pound of veal, half a pound of ham, 4 hard eggs, herbs and seasonings, mushrooms and the cabbage caustic chopped amongst the rest finely, all mixed with the yolk of an egg, and put into the hollow part of the cabbage. Tie it with pack-thread. Slices of bacon are to be laid on the bottom of a stewpan, upon which is a pound of beef cut thin to be laid, and the cabbage to be laid above all close. 'Tis to be covered and set to stew over a fire till the bacon sticks to the pan. Then, says she, shake flour and pour in a quart of broth, onion, cloves, mace, white pepper, a bundle of sweet herbs. Close cover it, and let it stew an hour and a half. Then put in a glass of red wine, and give it a boil. Then, says she, take it up and lay it in the dish, and strain the gravy over, untie it first. This, says she, is a fine dish, and the next day makes a fine hash, with a veal steak nicely broiled and laid on it. In my opinion, this forced cabbage would be a hash the first day, which would give all stomachs that received it such a disgust as would make them say from cabbage caustic, forcemeat, "Good Lord, deliver us." In page 125 is a white peas soup, wherein the teacher bids take 3 pounds of thick flank of beef, half a pound of bacon, a bundle of sweet herbs, and a good quantity of dried mint, a bunch of the green tops of celery, a quart of split peas, and 3 gallons of water, to be close covered, and set on the fire, and let it boil till 2 parts are wasted, then to be strained, and fix heads of celery cut small and put in it, to boil to 3 quarts, then cut fat and lean bacon, and bread into dices, and fried, to season the soup with salt, and rub dried mint over, after it is poured into the dish, and so send it to the table. She says you may add forcemeat balls fried, coxcombs boiled in it, an ox palate stewed, tender and small. The teacher sets forth another way to make it. She says when you boil a leg of pork or a good piece of beef, save the liquor. The next day boil a leg of mutton, save the liquor. When it is cold, take off the fat, and let it on the fire with 2 quarts of peas. Let them boil till they are tender, then put in the pork and beef liquor, with the ingredients as above, and let it boil till it be as thick as you would have it, allowing for the boiling. Again, says she, strain it off, and add the ingredients as above. Likewise, you may make your soup of veal or mutton gravy, if you please. That is according to your fancy. None boils a leg of pork before it is first salted, so it is as common to salt beef, the broth of which very few gentry will let their servants eat. But to make a pease soup withal, the ingredients which this lady has crammed into the above and the under soup, scarce any dog's stomach, I think, is able to digest, or if it could, it would certainly throw them into some leprosy. The first time I perused this soup, I loathed meat for 3 days. In page 127, to make hodgepodge, to which she takes a pound of beef, a pound of veal, and a pound of a scrag of mutton, cut into little pieces, to be set on the fire with 2 quarts of water, an ounce of barley, onion, sweet herbs, 4 heads of celery, mace, cloves, whole pepper, 3 turnips, 1 carrot, 2 lettuces cut small, put all in the pot, and let it stew softly over a slow fire 5 or 6 hours. Take out the spice, herbs, and onion, and pour all into a soup dish. I think there would be no manner of occasion for a soup dish, nor any broth to pour into it. It would be a wonder if the 3 pounds of meat, barley, roots, and other ingredients were not burnt to the pot bottom. Let it stew ever so slowly, for 2 quarts will not stand 5 or 6 hours simmering without being exhausted dry, if not burnt to the pot bottom, as the lady has prescribed. In page 128 is a portable soup. This teacher bids take 2 legs of beef of 50 pounds weight, and take off all the skin and fat, and take the meat and sinews clean from the bones, which meat put into a large pot with 8 or 9 gallons of water. She bids add to it 12 anchovies, mace, and pepper, each an ounce, cloves, 1/4 of an ounce, 6 large onions, 6 large onions, a bundle of sweet herbs, the crust of a 2-penny loaf. Stir all together, cover it close, and lay a weight on the cover. And when it has boiled 8 or 9 hours, uncover it, and stir it all together. Cover it again, and let it boil till it becomes a rich good jelly. She says, when you think it is a thick jelly, take it off and strain it through a coarse hair bag. Press it hard, then strain it through a hair sieve into a large earthen pan. When it is quite cold, take off the skim and fat, and take the fine jelly clear from the settlings. Now, for a good wager, I could venture to make more glue of the bones and sinews, which this teacher separates from the meat of 2 50-pound legs of beef, than she shall do with the meat and all hot spices, anchovies, etc., which to me is poisoning any soup. Portable soup was contrived to support tender travellers on the road. But what support can reasonably be left in the lady's glue? For the skin, fat, bones, and sinews taken from the meat, as the teacher terms it, so that she leaves as much of the 2 legs as she takes, to which 9 gallons of water are to boil 8 or 9 hours, a sufficient time for all the strength and taste of the meat to steam out in smoke and air. Yet it will take 16 hours to bring this meat to so thick a jelly, by slow boiling, and the crust of a 2-penny loaf, boiling so long a time in the broth, must make it thick after pressing the jelly so hard through a coarse hair bag. Although she bids strain it through a hair sieve into a large earthen pan, and when cold to take off the fine jelly clear from the settlings. Now I put the query, how this fine jelly gets clear from the crust of the 2-penny loaf, because boiling so long it would become a paste glue, rather than a clear jelly, which this teacher makes manifest, in boiling it afterwards in a well-tinned stewpan, which she bids take great care that it neither stick to the pan or burn, as it will be lumps about the pan, which lumps are to be put into china cups set into water and boiled, and when the glue is cool, turn it on coarse flannel. And when the glue is cool, turn it on coarse flannel. Let it lie 8 or 9 hours. Keep it in a warm, dry place, and turn it on fresh flannel till it be quite dry, and the glue will be quite hard. I think the method which this teacher prescribes to dry this glue must be dangerous to the stomach, for it would pull all the wool from off the coarse new flannels, and by turning it on fresh flannel till it become quite dry, the wool would be so interwoven with the glue as to make a sad spectacle, as well as a dangerous prescription of it. And as the teacher has not given orders to strain the gravy when the glue was melted, it is very doubtful that those who have supped most of her soup must eat most wool. Now the teacher bids, when you use it, to pour boiling water on it, and keep it stirring all the time till it be melted. She says a piece as big as a large walnut will make a pint of water very rich. And further, the lady directs how to make soups and strong sauces of this glue, and says this is only in the room of a rich good gravy. Yet I will give any of her adherents all this rich glue that she has made of her 2 50-pound legs of beef directed, and for a wager will make a better soup of 5 pounds of beef, with only the help of roots. In page 130, this teacher bids bake an oat pudding. She says, of oats decocticated, take 2 pounds, and of new milk enough to drown it, and 8 ounces of raisins stoned, an equal quantity of currants neatly picked, a pound of sweet suet, finely shred, fix new-laid eggs well beat, season with nutmeg, ginger, and salt. This, says she, will make a better pudding than rice. But I say that rice is far superior to half-shelled oats for puddings, nor would I advise any to eat this oat pudding that has a sore throat, for the seeds would certainly give them great pain. Her next is a calf's foot pudding. Take of calf's feet a pound minced fine, 1.5 pounds of suet shred small, 6 eggs, but half the whites, the crumb of a halfpenny roll grated, a pound of currants, and a handful of flour, as much milk as will moisten it with eggs, salt, nutmeg, and sugar. Season it to your taste, and boil it, says she, 9 hours with your meat. What is there in this pudding that can endure 9 hours boiling? The calf's feet must be tender boiled, or they will not mince fine. The small shred suet needs very little boiling. The handful of flour, the crumbs of the halfpenny loaf grated, eggs, fruit, and all together, seems to me not to require above an hour's boiling. And if it boils 9, what will it be then, or what limb of the bullock can stand 9 hours boiling, and keep whole? In page 136 is ham pie. The teacher bids, take some cold boiled ham, and slice it about half an inch thick, to make a good crust, and thick over the dish, and lay a layer of ham. Shake pepper over it. Then lay a large young fowl on the ham, with yolks of eggs hard boiled, and cover all with ham, and more pepper to be shaked on. Then put on the top crust, bake it well, and when it comes out of the oven, fill it with rich beef gravy. Adds that a fresh ham will not be so tender. So, says she, I always boil my ham one day and bring it to table. The next day I make a pie of it. It does better than an unboiled ham. But I say, the teacher might be as reasonably say that a leg of mutton should be first boiled, and the next day made into a pie, as to boil the ham and then to bake it. As to her own, she might order it her own way, but when her orders are general, her judgment should have been better in ham pie making. In page 193 is to make a Yorkshire Christmas pie. A bushel of flour is to be made into a standing crust, which according to her directions in page 145, for standing crusts, will take 24 pounds of butter. A turkey, goose, fowl, partridge, and a pigeon are to be boned, and put one within another, and all to be put into a large turkey. Black pepper, nutmeg, and mace of each half an ounce. Cloves 1/4 of an ounce. 2 spoonfuls of salt. This great turkey is laid in the crust, to look like a whole one. Then is a hare cut to pieces, and laid on one side. On the other side, woodcocks, moor game, and what sort of wild fowl you can get. All to be seasoned well, and laid close. 4 pounds of butter, at least, is to be put into this pie, and a very thick lid to be laid on, and it must, says she, have a very hot oven, and will take at least 4 hours baking. I should think that a pie with such a crust, and so well filled, would take 14 hours, if the walls stood, which in my opinion is impossible, for the great quantity of butter she orders her standing crusts without water, or as little as you can when you skim it off, says she. So this greasy crust so well filled, and 4 pounds of butter put over all, must make such a stench in the oven as would bring down the pie. And if it was set whole into the oven, it must come out in parcels. And I think I could make a corporation feast of the expense of this Yorkshire Christmas pie. In page 144 is paste for tarts. Take 1 pound of flour, 3/4 of a pound of butter, mixed and beat well with a rolling pin. Another sort of paste for tarts, which is butter, flour, and sugar, of each 1/2 pound, mixed and well beat with a rolling pin, and then roll it out. But I say the 1/2 pound of flour is so far outmatched with the sugar and butter, that the ignorant girl must exceed me in pastry, if she can roll out a lid for a tart, as she is directed by her teacher. In page 145 is a dripping crust. She orders 1.5 pounds of beef drippings, to be boiled up 5 times in water, and set to cool. Then to work it up well in 3 pounds of flour, as fine as you can, and make it up into paste with cold water. It makes a very fine crust, says she, of the sort. Say I, which sort I would not willingly recommend to delicate ladies' stomachs. Next follows a crust for custards. Take 8 ounces of flour to 6 ounces of butter, 3 spoonfuls of cream, mix all together, and let them stand 1/4 of an hour. Then work it up and down, and roll it thin. For my part, I cannot find out the meaning of this up and down custard crust. And next is paste for crackling crusts. This crust is to be made of 4 handfuls of almonds. Throw them into water, dry them with a cloth, and pound them in a mortar very fine, with a little orange flower water, and the white of an egg, all to be well pounded, and put through a coarse hair sieve, to clear them from all the lumps or clods, says she. Then spread it on a dish till it is very pliable. Let it stand a while, and then roll out a piece for the undercrust, and dry it in the oven in the pie pan, while other pastry works are making, as knots, ciphers, etc., for garnishing your pies. This is very odd pastry cookery for the ignorant to be improved by, for their teacher has left them in the dark as to finishing this pie, by putting the undercrust into the pie pan and setting it in the oven to dry, but does not tell them what this undercrust is to be filled with, or how, or in what manner they are to proceed with this pie. I can see nothing she designs for it, but knots and ciphers for garnishing to this undercrust. So I call it a cipher pie, which in reality it must be, for if there is a pastry cook in England that can make this paste so pliable, as she calls it, so as to raise either tart or pie, or to turn either out of a pan, I have lost my judgment. In page 166 is to dress a brace of carp. This teacher bids boil the carp in salt and water, and for sauce a pint of stale beer, and a pint of red wine. She adds mace, cloves, nutmeg, pepper, onion, sweet herbs, anchovy, horseradish, catsup, mushroom pickle, and 1/4 of a pound of butter. Certainly the pint of red wine and the pint of stale beer, boiled with so much hot spice, would fuddle the brace of carp. Yet this teacher has ordered 2 baked carp to be put into a pan, with a bottle of white wine, and as many ingredients as is above prescribed. And to fry tench, she gives a whole page of such inconsistencies of cream, eggs, bread, herbs, and spices, gravy, wine, etc., etc., and after all says, you may dress them just as you do carp. Next is to roast a cod's head. The teacher bids, after the head is clean washed, to salt it and lay it in a stewpan before the fire, with something behind it that the fire may roast it, and all the water that comes from it the first half-hour throw away. Then strew on nutmeg, cloves, mace, salt, and flour, then to be basted with butter. When that has lain some time, season and flour it. Baste the other side the same way. Turn it often, and baste it with crumbs of bread. If it is a large head, it will take 4 or 5 hours baking, says she. Have ready melted butter, some of the fish liver bruised, and an anchovy mixed well with 2 yolks of eggs, then to be strained through a sieve, and put into the saucepan again. Add shrimps, pickled cockles, red wine, and the juice of a lemon. Pour it into the pan the head was roasted in, and stir it all together, and pour it into the saucepan. Keep it stirring, let it boil, and pour it into a basin. Garnish the head with fried fish, lemon, and horseradish. 5 hours roasting a cod's head would make it more fit to grind in a mill than to send up to a lady's table. The teacher bids, at the first laying down, to turn it often. It would be a very great wonder if the ignorant hand did not turn it out of its natural shape in 4 or 5 hours, in which time she did not consider how many cinders the pan it was roasted in would catch. Nay, the very crumbs it was basted with would roast to cinders in that space of time. It has this teacher bid, pour in all her tossed-up sauce into this pan, and pour it into the saucepan again, and boil it all together. And I only ask, would not the yolks of eggs break the sauce? But it could not spoil the head, because that has been done already. In page 176, to broil haddocks, when they are in high perfection. She bids gut and wash them clean, but don't rip open their bellies. Take out the guts and gills, and if there be roes or livers, take them out, but put them in again. Flour them well, have a clear good fire and clean grate iron, let it be hot. Lay them on, and turn them quick 2 or 3 times for fear of sticking, and let one side be enough, then turn the other. This teacher is as far out of the art of cookery in broiling haddocks as in roasting a cod's head. First, in putting the roes and livers into their bellies. Secondly, in flouring them, and turning them quick at first on the grate iron. For when haddocks are in high perfection, I will lay a wager to broil a haddock as soon as any cook in England will broil the roe. Then what must the haddock be if it is to broil till the roe within it be enough? And as for flouring and turning it so very soon, this would cement it to the grate iron. But if she would broil the fish whole instead of flour, lay on plenty of salt, and don't turn it till it's half broiled. Then turn it and broil the other side. In page 150 is to make a skate or thornback soup. Take 2 pounds of skate or thornback, which is to be skinned and boiled in 6 quarts of water. When 'tis enough, take it up. Take off the flesh and lay it by. Put in the bones again, and take 2 pounds of any other fish, lemon peel, sweet herbs, pepper, mace, horseradish, a crust of bread, and parsley. Boil it to 2 quarts. Strain it off, and add an ounce of vermicelli, and set it to boil. And in the meantime take a French roll, cut a little hole in the top, fry the crust brown in batter, take the flesh off the fish you laid by, and put it into a saucepan, with 3 spoonfuls of the soup, flour and butter, pepper and salt. Shake them all together in a saucepan till it is quite thick. Then fill the roll with it. Pour your soup into the dish, and let the roll swim in the middle. As the roll is filled with fish, she gives it leave to swim, though she had robbed the fish of fins, skin, and bones, so that it could not swim. Neither would it let the French roll swim. Therefore it must be contented to stand upon its own bottom. In page 165 she bids, make a hedgehog thus for change. 2 quarts of almonds blanched, and beat in a mortar with canary and orange flower water. 2 spoonfuls of the tincture of saffron, 2 spoonfuls of sorrel juice. Beat them into a fine paste. Put in half a pound of melted butter, nutmeg, mace, citron, and orange, of each an ounce. 12 eggs, half the whites beat up and mixed in half a pint of cream, a pound of double refined sugar, and work it up all together. If it be not stiff enough to make into the form you would have it, you must have a mold for it. Butter it well, then put in the ingredients and bake it. But, says she, the mold must be made in such a manner as to have the head peeping out when it comes out of the oven. A mechanical head requires well-furnished garrets, lest the schemes run as confused as her way to make the hedgehog for change, which such an odd jumble as sets forth the excellency of this teacher's taste and judgment. Now I pray, what manner of right hath the tincture of saffron, sorrel juice, nutmeg, mace, eggs, or cream in the hedgehog, baked or boiled in a mold? If it were either reasonable that the mold should be to make after the hog was made, or where can you find an artist to make the head peep out in the baking? Besides, she says, you may leave out the saffron and make it up like chickens, or in any shape you please, or alter the sauce to your fancy. Butter, sugar, and white wine is a pretty sauce for either baked or boiled, or you may make the sauce of what color you please, or put it into a mold with half a pound of currants, and boil it for a pudding. You may use cochineal instead of saffron. She adds, rock alum and cochineal boiled in water. This, says she, is to make sauces with. Her orders are to make it up like chickens, or in any shape you please. Now, suppose it was made in the effigy of the lady teacher, garnished with cochineal, rock alum, saffron, and sorrel, and what other colors the artist fancies. She must deserve garnishing that puts rock alum in sauces, for rock alum is an excellent ingredient in tanning leather for breeches. Dyers likewise set their colors with it, and so does the lady teacher set stomachs with it. In page 180, to force eels with white sauce. The flesh is to be picked off the bone of the eel, the head to be left whole. The flesh is to be beat in a mortar fine, with half the quantity of crumbs of bread, truffles, anchovies, pepper, nutmeg, and mushrooms, mixed well with cream with your hand, and lay it on the bone, but to make it in the shape of an eel, and bake it. For sauce, have half a pint of cream, and 1/4 pound of butter. Stir one way till it is thick, and pour it over the eel. To thicken the half pound of butter, this teacher has ordered a handful of flour, and to thicken 1/4 pound of butter, there is half a pint of cream ordered. To stir one way till it is thick. It must not be stirred over the fire to be made thick, for that will shortly make it thin, and the butter will be uppermost. But in case it is thick, where to find a stomach that can digest cream and a forced eel mixed with cream, in the above very odd manner, I know not. In page 184 is to make a collar of fish in ragout, to look like a breast of veal collard. A forcemeat made of a large eel, a turbot, skate, or thornback is to be laid on a dresser. Take away all the bones and fins, the fish to be covered with the farce. Then roll it up tight and open the eel skin, and bind the collar with it nicely, so that it may be flat top and bottom to stand well in the dish. Then is an earthen dish to be buttered, upon which set the collar upright, flour and butter it. Let it be well baked, but take great care it is not broken. So if the maid by her teacher's order takes a turbot, and accordingly rolls it up tight with this eel's skin, which must be a long one, for such a roll will take a skin 1.5 yards long. So she sets this collar upright in the oven, but as soon as the heat does pierce the eel skin, crack it goes, and this upright collar may stand or fall, for the eel skin is no longer a bandage for it. And instead of a collar like a rolled breast of veal, she may be disappointed with a broken dish of fish farce altogether, and learn by experience never to trust a collar of turbot with an eel skin bandage again. In page 188 is to ragu oysters. This teacher bids, take a quart of the largest oysters you can get. Wash them, save their liquor, and make a batter thus. Take 2 yolks of eggs, grate half a nutmeg, lemon peel cut small, a good deal of parsley, a spoonful of spinach juice, 2 spoonfuls of cream or milk. Beat all well up with flour to a thick batter. Have ready some butter in a stew pan, and dip them one by one in the batter. Then have crumbs of bread, and roll them in it. Fry them quick, and brown some with the crumbs of bread, and some without. Then have ready a quart of chestnuts shelled. Fry them, rub butter and flour all over the pan, and when it is thick, then put in the oyster liquor, 4 blades of mace, pistachio nuts shelled. Let them boil, then put in the chestnuts and half a pint of wine. Have in readiness the yolks of 2 eggs, beat up with 4 spoonfuls of cream. Stir all together, and when it is thick, lay the oysters in the dish and pour the ragu over them. As much as to say, smother the oysters with hodgepodge made of oyster liquor, butter and flour to make it thick, yolks of eggs and cream to make it thicker, chestnuts and pistachio nuts fuddled with wine, all to smother the quart of large oysters, which upon their own shells might appear at a nobleman's table, and create an appetite. But as she ragoos them, creates great trouble to the cook, extravagant expense to the master, and destroys appetite. And as to her thick batter of cream, eggs, spinach juice, and all the rest of her various mixtures, it may be labor in vain, although she dips the oysters in the batter and rolls them in crumbs of bread, yet 10 to 1, but they make an escape out of the batter, and come out of the frying pan, a plain oyster. If I send up oysters in masquerade, I put a coat on them, and takes great care to button it well, lest my slippery chaps play me the slip, and make their escape. In page 201 is to fry eggs as round as balls. 3 pints of clarified butter is to be put into a deep frying pan, to be stirred with a stick till it runs round like a whirlpool. Then is an egg to be dropped into the middle of it, and made as hard as poached eggs. So whirl it on a dish before the fire. They keep hot, says she, half an hour and be soft. So you may do as many as you please. Adds, you may serve those with what you please, but nothing better than stewed spinach, garnish with orange, says she. I say those eggs will not be as round as balls are, as they are to lie on a dish half an hour and be soft. Now had she boiled them in this whirlpool till they had been as hard as stones, they might have been as round as balls. But she has but made a dish of fried eggs and spinach, and a dish of poached eggs and spinach would exceed them for beauty, and moreover would save 6 pounds of butter. For 3 pints of clarified butter will require 6 London butter pounds. In the next place, how far does she come short in regard of the 6 pounds of butter to fry the 12 eggs, concerning which she makes so much ado in her preface, in exclaiming against the extravagance of French cooks? Besides, when 12 eggs are whirled out separately one by one, the clarified boiling like a whirlpool would become so black as it would not make another dish. Now had this teacher ordered the eggs to be poached and spinached, she would have saved the servant a vast deal of trouble, the master abundance of butter, and me sufficient laughing at the whirlpool.